They don't wake up thinking they're better than you. That's the first lie people believe. In fact, most of the 1% don't even think about you at all. Not because they're evil, not because they're heartless, but because their brain has been trained to see the world in a completely different shape. While most people grow up learning how to fit in, the 1% grow up learning how to separate, not loudly, not aggressively, silently. From a young age, they are exposed to one dangerous idea. Life is not fair, and fairness is not the goal. This thought doesn't make them cruel, it makes them calm. When something goes wrong, they don't panic. When something fails, they don't spiral. Their nervous system doesn't scream for safety the way most people's does. It adjusts. Psychologists call this emotional insulation, a mental buffer built by repeated exposure to uncertainty, risk, and control. Over time, fear stops feeling like a warning, it becomes information. This is why their decisions feel cold, why they can walk away from people, projects, even entire industries without guilt. They aren't detaching emotionally in the moment, they detached years ago. And here's the part that feels uncomfortable to hear. Most people are emotionally attached to outcomes. The 1% are attached to systems. They don't chase happiness, they chase leverage. They don't ask, how will this make me feel? They ask, what does this give me control over? That single shift rewires everything. Relationships become networks, time becomes an asset, emotions become signals, not commands. And once your brain learns to see the world this way, you can't unsee it. Because the real difference between you and them was never money. It was the moment their minds stopped needing permission to think differently. Most people believe the gap between them and the 1% is money, but money is just the surface. The real separation happens much earlier and much deeper. The 1% live inside a different psychological boundary. They are trained, slowly and quietly, to see themselves as operators, not participants. While others ask for approval, they assume access. While others wait to be chosen, they move as if they already are. This creates something psychologists call identity elevation. Not arrogance, not ego, a deep internal belief that their decisions matter more than circumstances. That belief changes how the brain processes rejection. For most people, rejection feels personal. It triggers shame, self-doubt, and hesitation. For the 1%, rejection is treated like feedback from a faulty system. They don't internalize no, they study it. This is why they can sit in rooms where they don't belong and feel comfortable, why they can speak with certainty even when they're unsure. Their confidence isn't loud, it's assumed. Another invisible separation forms around time. Most people experience time emotionally. Days feel long, waiting feels painful, the future feels distant. The 1% experience time strategically. They think in decades, not weeks. They delay gratification not through discipline, but through vision. Their brain is constantly asking, what does this compound into? This changes how patience feels. Waiting doesn't hurt when you believe the outcome is inevitable. And here's the quiet truth most people miss. The 1% don't feel more motivated than you. They feel less urgency. Urgency creates stress. Stress narrows thinking. Calm expands it. By removing emotional urgency, they gain mental space, and in that space, they see opportunities others rush past. This is why their success looks effortless from the outside. You're watching the result of a mind that learned to slow down, while the rest of the world was taught to hurry. Most people think the 1% are obsessed with money. They're not. Money is just a side effect of something far more powerful. The real obsession is freedom from emotional dependency. The average person's mood is tied to approval, stability, and certainty. Praise feels like oxygen. Security feels like survival. Without them, anxiety rises. The 1% break this bond early. They learn to operate without reassurance, without constant validation, without needing to feel safe before they act. This creates the illusion that they don't care, but what they've really done is remove emotion from the decision loop. And here's the twist most people never see. This detachment doesn't make them happier, it makes them effective. They can make decisions that hurt in the short term without flinching. They can disappoint people they respect. They can choose paths that isolate them socially. Because their sense of self doesn't come from being liked, it comes from being aligned. Aligned with long-term outcomes, aligned with control over their future, aligned with their internal rules, not social pressure. This is why their empathy feels different. They understand pain, they just don't let it steer them. They can care deeply and still walk away. They can help without rescuing. They can listen without absorbing. Most people confuse this with coldness, but it's actually emotional discipline at an extreme level. And here's the uncomfortable question this creates. If your emotions were no longer in charge, how many of your current choices would disappear? Because the 1% didn't gain power by adding something, they gained it by subtracting emotional dependence. Once that happens, the world stops controlling you. There's a price no one talks about. From the outside, the 1% look untouchable. Confident, unbothered, always in control. But psychological insulation has a side effect. When you numb chaos, you also dull connection. Many of them struggle to feel ordinary joy. Small wins don't register. Moments that feel magical to others feel quiet. Their brain is constantly scanning for leverage, not presence, always calculating the next move, always detached from the moment they're standing in. This creates a strange loneliness, not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being misunderstood. They can't fully explain their thinking without sounding cold. They can't slow down without feeling exposed. Vulnerability feels inefficient, and trust becomes complicated. When you understand how systems influence behavior, you stop believing in pure intentions. Every relationship is unconsciously tested, every interaction quietly analyzed. This is why many in the 1% build walls instead of bridges, not because they hate people, but because intimacy requires surrender, and surrender feels like loss of control. Here's the paradox. The same psychological traits that elevate them also isolate them. The higher they climb, the fewer people can meet them mentally. Success narrows their emotional circle. Power reduces relatability, and awareness kills innocence. They don't talk about this openly because admitting it would sound like complaining from the top. But inside, many of them feel something unsettling, a question that never fully goes away. Was the trade worth it? The most dangerous thing about the 1% is not their money, their power, or their influence. It's how easily their mindset can infect others. Once you understand how control works, how emotions shape behavior, how systems quietly decide outcomes, you can never go back to seeing the world the same way. This knowledge doesn't ask for permission, it changes you. You start noticing who benefits from every rule, who stays calm when others panic, who moves first while others wait. And slowly, a choice appears in front of you. You can stay emotionally comfortable, attached to approval, guided by fear and familiarity. Or you can detach, think longer, feel less, see more. But here's the haunting truth. Becoming like the 1% doesn't require money. It requires a psychological shift that most people avoid because it feels empty at first. When you stop needing validation, silence gets louder. When you stop reacting emotionally, life feels colder. And not everyone survives that transition. The 1% didn't unlock a secret world. They stepped into a mental space most people are too afraid to enter. Because on the other side of comfort is clarity. And clarity comes with a cost. Once you see the game, you're no longer just playing to win. You're deciding whether you even want to play at all. There's one last illusion that needs to break. People think the 1% are a different species, born smarter, wired better, destined for the top. They're not. The real difference is this. At some point, they stopped asking the world how to live and started deciding for themselves. That decision is quiet. It doesn't feel powerful in the moment. It feels isolating. Because when you detach from the emotional rules of the crowd, you lose the comfort of belonging before you gain anything else. This is the part no one romanticizes. The phase where clarity arrives before rewards, where you see through patterns but haven't escaped them yet. Most people turn back here, not because they can't succeed, but because they miss being guided. The 1% keep going. They accept that understanding people means standing apart from them, that influence requires distance, that control demands restraint. And eventually, a strange calm settles in. Not happiness, not excitement, a grounded certainty. They stop chasing meaning through achievement. They stop proving themselves to invisible judges. They move quietly, intentionally, and without urgency. And here's the haunting realization that lingers long after you close this video. The mindset of the 1% isn't reserved for the rich. It's available to anyone willing to give up emotional comfort in exchange for psychological freedom. Most people will never make that trade, not because they can't, but because deep down, they're not sure they want to become the kind of person who no longer needs the world to agree with them.